Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with special guest, John Murphy. And he's here today to share with us his new book, Miracle-Minded Manager, a modern-day parable about how to apply A Course of Miracles in business. Now, John is a founder and CEO of Venture Management Consultants, Inc., which is a firm specializing in creating lean, high-performance work environments. He credits his success in business and in life to A Course in Miracles. First learning and studying this practice in 2008, John has quadrupled his business and growth and prosperity. He hopes to work with others and individuals to teach them the incredible benefits the lessons of A Course in Miracles has to offer us. So let's welcome to the show, John Murphy.
Thank you, Marianne. It's great being here.
You know, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. My goodness, I can't wait to dive into that, but I really would love for you to share with our listeners, what even started you on this path?
Well, I started writing almost 30 years ago. This is actually my 20th book. And this particular book is, in fact, a sequel. It's a story. It's a parable, an allegory. And it's a sequel to a book I wrote 26 years ago that got a great deal of attention about a man trying to change his corporate culture. A leader, happened to be a man, trying to change his corporate culture. And he's running into all kinds of resistance. And now transformational change and culture change and business transformation is all pretty big stuff. But 25, 26 years ago, it was a little bit new. People weren't talking as much about culture, 25 years ago. And so the book was kind of a leading edge. It was called Agent of Change, Leading a Cultural Revolution. And the leader in this story, his name's Jack. He was running into all kinds of resistance and trouble, and so he got the help of a consultant who he had met through a team building workshop, which is how I got launched 30 years ago, teaching team building and team techniques, leadership development type stuff. So anyways, Jack learns how to pull people and get them aligned and pull them together and really synergize as a culture, kind of like a symphony orchestra that's all playing as one. It's powerful. So he learns that in the book 25, 26 years ago. And he now returns with Miracle-Minded Manager because he's been very successful. He's been promoted. He's now president of a major business unit. But he's struggling with some family issues. He's struggling with some life issues. And now, of course, life coaching is a pretty big deal. And I do quite a bit of that along with executive coaching. So Jack goes back and asks for help from this consultant who helped him before. Because one of the things he noticed about the consultant is that he always seemed to be very poised, very graceful. He didn't get worked up about things. And so he's like, how do you do that? You don't even seem to get stressed. The rest of the world's dealing with stress and coping with stress. We have all these stress management strategies, go to the gym and, meditate and do yoga and maybe have a few beers or a glass of wine or something. But how do you do it? And so the consultant reveals to Jack through this story how to actually eliminate stress from your life, delete it rather than try to manage it. So it's a real paradigm shift, if you will. And I incorporate things like a law of attraction and A Course in Miracles and some very deep spiritual ancient teachings into the story to make it really, really compelling. So and I'd add that it's not just about business managers trying to lead with more grace and more confidence and more inner peace. It's for anybody actually trying to lead their life in that way, especially when there's a virus like this coronavirus going around.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we're hoping that our best natures show up now. And I think your book also helps put into perspective what's important and for people to really kind of look at themselves in a deeper way.
Well, exactly. And so what you can see, in a nutshell, the book is about shifting from a fear-based thought system, which we call ego. Ego is a fear-based thought system. And as long as we're in that box, so to speak, that ego box, we're living in fear, whether we consciously admit it or not. We fear anything that we value because we're attached to it. We're attached to other people. We're attached to our jobs, our incomes, our homes, our health. And so any threat of that attachment scares us. So the shift in Miracle Minded Manager is to shift completely out of that box. I like to remind people that it doesn't do a lot of good to manage problems inside a box or a paradigm when it's actually the box that's the problem. You're just moving chairs around on the Titanic, so to speak. You've got to really step back and look at a completely different outlook, a completely different mindset. So the Miracle Minded Manager's mindset is a shift from fear, a fear-based, dualistic, right, wrong, us, them, good, bad, up, down, ego thought system, which is also known as human nature, to a spiritual-based, love with a capital L, unconditional love-based thought system. And when we're in that thought system, we're not afraid of anything. It's hard for human beings to even imagine that, but there are people on this planet who actually live that way. And they're not stressing, they're not worrying about, the next great big catastrophe that's coming this way. They're not stressing because they recognize that life continues even after we leave our bodies. Life existed before we came into our bodies. Life is cyclical, not linear. It's like the seasons. It's like everything around us. It's moving in cycles. And, some refer to this as karma. Some refer to this as flow and the great Tao. But when we start to shift out of this programming that we all have, this thought system that we've all grown up with, into a miracle-minded mindset, and this is what A Course in Miracles actually teaches us, and when we make that shift, it's just truly profound. I've actually shared the stage, and I won't mention them by name, but with a couple of people who are some of the most fascinating death experience cases on the planet, written New York Times best-selling books. And they talk about the experience they had after they passed this body and then were told to come back, so to speak. And their stories are absolutely fascinating. But that's essentially the same message, the same teachings that we get out of A Course in Miracles, is that this is not a one and done, life. And there is nothing to fear. And we hear famous quotes like nothing to fear but fear itself, and, be not afraid. The Bible's full of statements like that. Fear not. But the truth is most of us do live in fear, and we can see it just vividly right now with the coronavirus that's been going around. People just absolutely terrified. And we couple that with something called law of attraction, which is we reap what we sow vibrationally. The energy we put out attracts like energy back. So it's misery loves company. If we go through life with a miserable vibration, we're just calling more misery into our lives. If we go through life with a fear-based vibration, a nervous, anxious, worrisome vibration, we're going to constantly witness things to be afraid of. They're going to be all around us. So the shift, paradigm shift from fear to capital L love, what I mean by that is that the ego defines love with a small L as something we fall in and out of. Well, I did love her, or I did love him, and it's, in other words, it's temporary. Where capital L love is eternal, it's unconditional, it's sacred, it's agape love, it's divine love, and we live in that love. It's a form of energy. It's where we all come from. We come from capital L love, and that's where we're going back to. And once we start to understand these things, life just completely unfolds in a different way. I would say a miraculous way.
That's so beautiful. I mean, and that's really how life should be, regardless what's going on around us. Because there's always going to be, this is a quite unique time, but there's always going to be disruptions and upset and challenges that we're going to face.
No question about it. Forest fires, earthquakes, hurricanes. I'm on the beach here in Palm Beach. I've lived here for the last 5 years. I've been in 3 hurricanes. And instead of running like everyone else does and evacuating and freaking out and, running the stores out of food and toilet paper and whatever people do, I stay here to help people who can't go anywhere, the elderly. And I go out on the beach and I actually talk to the hurricane. People might think I'm a little crazy, but I'm asking with energy, I'm asking the hurricane to calm down, just relax, settle down,
Mm-hmm.
But the fear, which is that collective energy that so many people share and emit. And again, once you start to really understand that everything we see and experience is energetic, It's vibrational. That we can actually collectively, and when we get together and pray, when we get together and meditate, when we get together and get into a love-based foundation in mindset and vibration, amazing things happen. Amazing, but the same is true the other way. When we all freak out and panic, we're literally fueling the forest fires.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, that happens quite often where you see if we're putting our energy into that, that's kind of what we're getting back, what you're talking to. One of the things I'd like to learn from you is a little bit more about your background in your career in business. What got you started in that?
I got fired.
Sounds like a
Well,
good, course change there.
yeah. Well, I made a, you could call them mistakes, but mistakes are just lessons, really. So, I degreed in finance out of Notre Dame in 1982. Went to work in Chicago for a couple of years in finance and discovered I majored in the wrong thing. I didn't like it. It's like, man, I just don't like this. So I made a change, and I took a step back, so to speak, in pay and everything else. And I went into human resource management. I wanted to be in something more people, related and organizational development type work. And I spent about 4 to 5 years there and did pretty radical stuff, made the national newspapers in 1986, actually, for some of the radical stuff I was doing culturally, dealing with labor unions and things like that. And the company I was with was then acquired by a big French company. And so I was part of a massive, like, downsizing, if you want to call it that, or change. And I shook my head wondering, wow, I wonder what I should do. But I had learned enough, so to speak, to be dangerous about teamwork. I also played football at Notre Dame. So I learned a lot about teamwork and leadership and poise and, alignment and strategy and working as one. So I took those lessons and the things I had learned, out of college and the business, two different companies, and then a big acquisition. And I started my practice. And that was 30 years ago this year. I started it with two other guys that didn't last 6 months. So it was a pretty brutal start.
Oh boy.
But I said, I found my way into teaching teamwork to businesses initially locally and then regionally. And then that led to my first book called Pulling Together: The Power of Teamwork, which got national attention. And next thing you know, I'm doing pulling together workshops with the CIA and the U.S. Navy and Fortune 100 companies. And then that book has now been published by like 5 different publishers in multiple versions. And then that led me to my first allegory, the one I described earlier, Agent of Change, a story about how do you pull people together in a typical culture. And then that just kept leading me more into inspirational type stuff. Inspirational meaning in spirit, meaning spiritual and fearless. And the next thing you know, I'm on stage with Tony Robbins and the late General Norman Schwarzkopf and Dennis Waitley and Ken Blanchard and people like that. I was like, wow, how'd I get here?
It sounds like you're at the right place at the right time. Eventually, it's kind of, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I like the word eventually because it doesn't always feel that way. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure many of your listeners can relate. It's like, well, I don't feel like I'm in the right place or the right time right now. But I can't even begin to tell you how many times I have wondered that very thing, only to discover some time later that there was a silver lining.
How important is that? My goodness. And when did A Course of Miracles, when did you become, involved in that?
Well, that's a wonderful question because I didn't know what it was, when I started my company. And but I was a self-help junkie. I was listening to, back in the day, it was, CDs and cassette tapes and reading actual physical books and, things like that. Just couldn't get enough of it. And it wasn't until, around about 20 years ago, the year 2000. No, it was even after that. It was in the early 2000s. I kept running across other teachers and leaders and consultants who I respected who were referencing A Course in Miracles. So one time I came back from a couple of weeks working over in Europe, and there in a big stack of mail on my desk was an invitation to take A Course in Miracles. And I thought, well, there's no coincidence. They're often referred to as synchronicities. They're just, spiritual coincidences, so to speak, messages. So I enrolled right away. It's a year-long course, one lesson per day for 365 days, and it's a completely a different programming of the mind, if you will. It's a shift away from that fear-based thought system to a love-based, fearless thought system, and it changed my life just dramatically. And from a business perspective, my revenues were quadrupled in 1 year. I wrote an award-winning book, best inspirational book of 2010, called Beyond Doubt: 4 Steps to Inner Peace. And the story behind that book's pretty interesting because I had never written a, quote, spiritual type book before. Everything I had written was business related. And I was actually working in Lyon, outside of Lyon, France, for a week doing a workshop, and then going up to London in that week. So the weekend in between, I had time off, and I up, and I'm thinking, I'm just go look at cathedrals and practice my French and get a good cup of coffee or something like that. But there was an energy, a presence in my room that commanded me to start writing again, because I had stopped writing for 9 years. I was halfway through a book when my father got deathly ill and then passed, and I just never went back to that book. I just didn't feel it. So for 9 years, I hadn't written anything. I was just consulting and speaking and things like that. And now all of a sudden, in this little hotel room in France, I'm being told to write, and I don't even know what to write about. And so I remember just resisting at first, saying, no, I'm not going to write. And then finally, I just opened my laptop and said, okay, you want me to write something? You tell me what to write. And I channeled the book Beyond Doubt, which was just, so it was mind-blowing for me, and it's been mind-blowing for a whole lot of other, evidently. But that Marianne, that shifted me, so to speak, from the straight leadership, teamwork, customer service type work that I was doing to something so much deeper. And then Beyond Doubt led me into Zentrepreneur and Sage Leadership, and now Miracle Minded Manager. So what I'm doing now is integrating some of these awesome spiritual teachings and lessons into very common, practical, modern day challenges. And it's a powerful niche.
It most definitely is. It's something that people are really craving, because while they may go to work and be very successful, without that spiritual component, you can win all the awards and it's just like, okay, I feel completely unfulfilled.
That's exactly Jack, the character in the Miracle Minded Manager. He's got all kinds of, successes, and, he's driving around in a fancy, expensive car, and he's, got piles of money, but he's not talking to his father. He's not talking to one of his brother. He's got challenges with his 2 kids. He's got, challenges with his wife. He's got some real, common things that he's not happy with. His physical health. He's got high blood pressure, and his father's got heart disease. So he's got some real common challenges. And, one of the messages in the book is, why manage something that you can delete? Why manage something you can get rid of? And that's stress. Why would I try to manage? And one of the things Jack is kicking himself is he's like not getting to the gym enough. I'm paying all this money for a gym membership. I never have time to go. And so then he's carrying around a bunch of guilt and grief, and, he's beating himself up over it. That doesn't help. That actually makes it worse. And we all know too that, stress interferes. Stress actually breaks down our immune system. That's why so many people get sick when they're stressed out. So, it literally triggers cortisol and adrenaline and some of the stress hormones that weaken the immune system. Now, all of a sudden, we're more vulnerable to, whatever cold or virus or bacteria that's floating around. We live in a pretty toxic world. So stress doesn't help.
No, not at all. In fact, it's something that, you're so right. It just kind of deteriorates our mind, body, spirit.
Yeah, precisely. But it's something we have control over, believe it or not. A lot of people think, well, I remember one of my daughters once told me, she's like, oh, I'm just so stressed out. She was in college at the time, and, exams and this and that. And I just listened to her for a minute, and then I finally said, well, why do you choose stress? She's like, what? I go, why do you choose to be stressed? And she says, I don't choose to be stressed. I just am. In other words, it's coming at me. out there somewhere, teachers and people who annoy us and circumstances and pressure for good grades or exams. I got to give this big speech and I'm getting all nervous, or I have this job interview and, and so I'm stressing over that, or I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job, or I'm afraid I won't get a job, or I won't find a good mate in life, or whatever. When the mind is thinking that stress is coming at us like an attack, we have nothing we can do about it. That's a completely different thought system than to recognize that stress is actually coming from us. It's all in our mind. It's not what's happening to us. It's what we think about what's happening to us. And stress is coming from a negative projection of the mind. So if I'm stressing about this speech I have to give, or this exam I have to take, or this interview I'm about to go into, if I'm stressing about it, I am projecting something negative into the future. I am assuming something's going to go wrong. I'm going to screw up. And that's what triggers the stress hormones. And then we feel it, and then we think it's real. But why would we assume something negative when we have a choice? We could assume, I'm going to nail this interview. I'm going to get this job. I'm prepared. I'm ready. I'm going to nail this exam. I'm going to nail this speech. Why project something negative when we have a choice? We could project something positive. But we live in such a negative environment, when you turn on the news, it's just bad news over and over and over again. And it's a subconscious programming. 95 to 98% of our daily lives is run by the subconscious mind, which is thoughts we don't even know we have. They're subconscious. And the conscious mind is usually not present. The conscious mind is usually thinking about what's going on tomorrow or what happened last week. So while the conscious mind is not present, the subconscious mind's running the show. And the subconscious mind has no choice to be present, and it's just replaying past programs. It's program-based, experience-based. So it's in charge, and that's just why people have trouble breaking habits, is because consciously they go, I'm going to stop doing this, or I'm going to start doing this. The conscious mind is saying, this is what I'm going to do. And the subconscious mind's going, yeah, right, you tried that last year. Good luck. And in fact, Dr. Bruce Lipton's done some fabulous work on that. And one quick statistic that's kind of mind-blowing is that the conscious mind can process about 40 bits of data per second, 40. The subconscious, 40 million. So it's no contest. It's a 1,000,000 to 1 ratio. The subconscious mind's far more powerful as a processor than the conscious mind. So a secret, so to speak, to habit change is not consciously willing to make a change. Yes, that's part of it. But identifying blockage, barriers, limiting beliefs, programs in the subconscious mind that are preventing us from flow, preventing us from ease and grace. All these beliefs about, it's flu season, I'm going to get sick. It's cold season, I'm going to get a cold. There's some new catastrophe that's happening. I better play it safe and go into defensive mode. And all of that triggers the stress, but it's all coming from the mind.
It's interesting. And if we're feeding our subconscious mind with, a lot of daily news that's got a lot of negative stuff, and I'm not saying, that we shouldn't pay attention to what's happening around us globally. But if we're constantly just being bombarded with this, of course we're feeling like we're being, chased by a pack of wolves,
Yeah. Well, I was just in a meeting the other day, an important meeting regarding the coronavirus that's been going around. And a doctor spoke up and he said, well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to assume I have it, and I'm going to lock myself in my room and basically seclude myself. And I just about fell out of my chair. This is a scientist, a doctor, saying that I'm going to assume this without any facts and data. I'm going to assume the worst. Now, I get the fact that, we want to be cautious and conscious of our neighbors and things like that. But why would you assume you're sick when you're not? Because when you look at that energetically and vibrationally, you are calling for sickness. You're asking for it. We reap what we sow, and most of what we sow is vibrational. So I was sort of floored by that. But that's the kind of thing, and this is from a well-trained, well-educated, He's retired now, but doctor. And so I also like to remind like my clients and people I'm working with, pay attention to who you pay attention to, because a lot of experts, with all due respect, they don't necessarily know what they're talking about. I was told by a world-renowned orthopedic surgeon in high school I'd never play football again after running my foot through a lawnmower. And he did 10 hours of surgery on my foot twice and put my foot back together again. But he said, son, I'm sorry to tell you this, but your football days are over. 2 years later, I was playing at Notre Dame. That's mind over matter.
It sure is. I mean, and never underestimate the human spirit, So.
Precisely. So, and I don't mean to sound disrespectful. Yeah, pay attention to the experts, but recognize that none of us know everything. All right? And here's the thing. We have to differentiate assumption from fact. The doctor, the orthopedic surgeon who told me I'd never play football again, that was an assumption, obviously, because it wasn't accurate. I did play. So a lot of what we base our lives on are assumptions, because we don't actually have any facts about the future. We don't actually have good data on something that hasn't happened yet. So I just like to remind people, challenge your assumption, check your assumptions.
That's so true, because a lot of those can end up being limiting beliefs as opposed to actual facts. And a lot of times we need to kind of explore those for ourselves.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So keep an open mind means challenge your assumptions. Pay attention to what you pay attention to. Pay attention to who you pay attention to. Mind your own mind. And be vigilant about it.
Well, it's important what we're feeding our mind, because it will be a direct correlation to what it is that we're experiencing and what we have as far as a life experience as well. What things do you want readers to take away from your book?
Recognize there's another thought system outside of the one you were born and raised with, the ego thought system, which is human nature. Recognize that that you have an opportunity to change the channel, to turn the dial, so to speak, vibrationally, just like you would a radio. You can, and you can change if your life is playing out in a negative way, and you're not happy with the way things are that you're reaping, then look at what you're sowing. Look within, because you are reaping what you are sowing. So a lot of times we want to blame some external factors for whatever it is we've got going on, but we're actually calling for it vibrationally. So I think the most important takeaway, and this is what I've taught my children who are all now grown, working world and through college and such, is pay darn close attention to what you are thinking, because when you're thinking something long enough, it becomes a belief. And when you think a belief long enough, it becomes a subconscious belief, which is very powerful. Another name for the subconscious mind is the habitual mind. It just runs over and over and over again. We end up just replaying these old stories that we've told ourselves, and they play out until the day we physically die.
Well, such great, advice for our listeners. Gosh, John, I mean, we could talk for hours. I can't believe that this time went by so quickly. We're going to have another discussion on this. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community?
Well, sure. Thank you for that, Marianne. My website is www.johnjmurphy.org. You can see my whole body of work there, johnjmurphy.org. You can also find me on Facebook, on LinkedIn. It's John J. Murphy Mystic on LinkedIn. It's author John J. Murphy on Facebook. Twitter, it's @SageLeader. So I'm easy to find. You can Google me. Google Miracle Minded Manager, or just go to my author page on Amazon, and you'll see a great deal of my work.
Well, John, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you, Marianne. Stay well.
Well, thank you, John. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you, and of course, to talk about your new book, Miracle Minded Manager. You can pick up John's book on Amazon. It's available on Kindle, also at Barnes & Noble and select indie retailers. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just what moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Friday and Saturday at 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.